Could we trust blockchain with the totality of the US economy? No. Could we trust it as an audit layer of the Treasury Department to basically look at all the payment inflows and outflows? Probably, yeah. And actually it'd be tremendously valuable because then you put AI on top of it and then you can look for waste, fraud, and abuse.
I do think that privacy is going to be a big part of the crypto narrative this year. So where is the ecosystem with Midnight and what can actually be done using that technology?
So Midnight is in its testnet and it's public. People can go to midnight.network and play around with it and use it. In fact, DC Spark just released a video game on Midnight. And really, there's two big value propositions of Midnight when you think about it as an ecosystem. One is the chain of chains. So Midnight is pioneering this model of being a layer 2 to everybody. So it launches from Cardano and it's secured by Cardano.
Welcome to the Financial Fox. This is Steffi, and today on the show, I'm excited to bring back Charles Hoskinson, co-founder of Ethereum, founder of Cardano, and serial entrepreneur. So, he has different businesses, he's one of the leading people in the crypto space, and he's also good friends of mine. So I was really looking forward to this interview. Now, before we get into the show, couple of things. First of all, if you are watching our interviews but you're not yet subscribed to the channel, please take a moment to do so. Remember that your support is crucial to grow the channel so we can educate more people about crypto. Also, the content on the show is for informational purposes only, I have to say that, and is not intended for financial advice. Any opinion expressed by me or my guests are ours alone, and you should not act solely on the back of them. As always, do your own research, level up your skills, and be accountable for your own decision. Now, the last word is about our sponsors. HIVE Digital Technologies, a publicly listed company building the next generation data center infrastructure with 100% renewable energy. HIVE was the first crypto miner to go public and the first one to have an AI strategy. With over 2,600 Bitcoin on their balance sheet and operations in Canada, Sweden, Iceland, and Paraguay, HIVE is fully committed to transforming communities, rebalancing the energy grid, and delivering value to shareholders with a low dilution and cash focus approach. If you don't know HIVE, check them out at HIVEdigitaltechnologies.com. Now, let's get to my interview with Charles. Charles, so good to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Wonderful.
Fantastic. I have to say, 2025 is going to be a great year, and we have got new president in the US, we have got a new America, and hopefully we are going to have a better environment for crypto to thrive. So how are you feeling about it?
Well, overall, I'm very happy about the direction of things. I mean, we went from a political regime whose sole purpose was to destroy the cryptocurrency industry. You know, they had Operation Choke Point where they were shutting people's bank accounts down. We had a SEC that stepped so far beyond its bounds and sued everybody under the sun. And we had a Kafka-esque regulatory regime where they said, come in and register, but we won't tell you how, but we'll tell you to register. It was just as bad as it gets. It exceeded any expectation of it being bad to a regime that's pro-crypto. So it's a little weird. It's like being in a prison camp or something, or being like a traumatized child or a puppy that's been abused. And finally you're in a loving home and you don't believe it. You're just a little scared. You're still having trouble falling asleep and these things, you're waiting for the shoe to drop. It's great. We have a bicameral commission that's formed to pass laws that are pro-crypto in the space. We have the executive branch has created a crypto czar, David Sachs, and the crypto commission led by Bo Hines. Both of them are very experienced people. They're working real time with people in the industry. The SEC has fired Gary Gensler. The new commissioner has put in Hester Peirce, who's the best possible person to create a commission there to fix things. It's going to take 90 to 120 days to get some basic laws passed. It looks like stablecoins will be the first that they regulate, and then moving from that, they'll do asset classification. But before the end of this year, I do believe very strongly that we will be on much stronger foundations in the United States and thus globally for running a cryptocurrency business. So it's absolutely amazing time. The markets are very healthy. They were able to absorb a Luna style event $760 billion left. You had almost 1 million people liquidated. It was a really traumatic event, and they absorbed it in 24 hours. That normally would collapse the market, and we'd be in a 6-month to year recession. So crypto's strong right now. The money inflows are looking good. The trading's looking good. The liquidity's looking good. The investments are looking good. And the United States is coming back into the puzzle, and all that institutional money is going to come in. So it's just incredible what 3 months' time can do, because it was very bleak and grim there for a bit, and now we're all optimistic and happy.
Yeah, exactly. I think there were lots of expectation, obviously, when Trump became president, and then you see he taking an approach where he put together crypto and AI, and raised a lot of question. Is he really going to focus on crypto? Why is putting the two things together? And obviously, we are in this industry, so we all think it's about crypto, but the reality out there is that the world is not all about crypto. And obviously you kind of like need to take some time to zoom back and understand what are the priorities.
Yeah, I still believe that they should have been separated. I mean, it's a hell of a job for David. I don't know how he's going to do both. In boca lupo, it's like, good luck, best of luck. So we'll see what he does with it. But he's making progress, and at the end of the day, it's not just David. It's going to be an all of government approach. The bicameral commission was super important because it brought 4 different groups together. 2 from the House and 2 from the Senate on both the ag and the financial services side, and those are the people that you need to work with each other in order to get comprehensive crypto legislation to pass. So we have a framework for it. From the House's perspective, it's likely going to be a retrofit of FIT 21, and from the Senate's perspective, they'll do some negotiations. So there are a lot of moving pieces to it, but overall, I'm very happy with the direction that things are going. Cautiously optimistic, though, because there's a lot of stuff that can happen to derail that. So we as an industry need to be eternally vigilant and work really hard to ensure that nothing gets in the way of us getting to a stable foundation. And then once we have that, it's a competitive market. Instead of worrying, God, how do we work with the government on this? It's like the government's not even in the business. Now it's just, how do you win? How do you get customers? How do you build a great product? Which is what it should have been from the very beginning.
It's great because like here from the UK, we are really looking at the US as kind of like a leading example. And I'm really hoping that you can kind of like set up the trajectory, and then hopefully even country like ours and Europe, they are going to strive as well, because it's, it's difficult. Everybody's talking about regulation and policy, but the real problem is education. And you are not going to be able to have regulation if you don't have education. And then I want to bring here also the concept of governance, because governance become really, really important when you put together regulation and education, because we are trying to go towards a world that is more decentralized as well. So it's complex.
Yeah, governance and decentralization is something governments don't understand. So they're at 101, and we as an industry, we're taking graduate classes or PhD classes. So they're still thinking, is it a security or a commodity? And they don't even really understand. Hang on a second here. You have fixed function, quasi-fixed function, smart contract. You have many different consensus notions. You have different notions of decentralization, and then ultimately upgradability. So governance comes into play and say, how do you regulate and maintain the system? Is it just like Bitcoin, it is what it is, and just deal with it? Or is there actually an active group of people that can make changes to the system to regulate the system? And those nuances are not there right now. Our hope is over the next 90 to 120 days, they can build those nuances out and understand there are differences, and they're very important, because from a regulatory perspective, when you look at these assets, you have to regulate them differently. Otherwise, you inadvertently either regulate them too strictly, or you don't acknowledge that agency failures can occur. Like if you have proof of stake and 80% of the supply is controlled by one person, that is not a decentralized system. That one person is in complete control of the system forever. So the monetary supply and the distribution dynamics are just as important as the code. Similarly, you can have a fully decentralized system, but if there's only one person who can maintain the code, well, then it's not very decentralized, because your network lives or dies by whether they show up and do their job. That's why we created the Edinburgh Decentralization Index with the University of Edinburgh, and we have 8 different areas that you can look at that are lenses of decentralization. And they range from the tokenomics all the way to the development, and they give you a good sense of basically what you can and can't do and how decentralized the system is in practice. And what's nice is that gives you then a policy prescription. So it gives you a metric you can look at to know when do you have to intervene and when can you be laissez-faire and kind of back off a bit.
So if I ask you this question, because I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of those regulators, they don't have enough education or experience in the space, and they will ask themselves, right, can we really trust the blockchain?
Yeah, I think that's the wrong question, but it is a tempting question for a regulator to ask. And the reason why I don't think it's a good question is trust is always referential to what you're trying to do. So usually how you answer that is like, okay, well, can I trust it with $5 of my money that I use to give tips on YouTube videos? That's a different trust than can I trust it with my life savings?
Yeah.
You know, there's trust. Can I trust it with public data, like my gaming history or whatever? Can I trust it with private data, like my medical data? You know, these types of things. So you always have to define what are the use cases you're looking at, and then what are the consequences if the system breaks. So use case and consequence, when you put those two things together, then you can start having a deep conversation about, well, trust. And what ends up happening is that people talk past each other. So one person says, I trust the blockchain completely. And another person says, well, this thing happened like FTX or Luna, and thus we can't trust the blockchain. Well, are they talking about two completely different things? Can we trust algorithmic stablecoins at a scale of JED? Yeah. It's been around for years. It's gone through many collapses. It's still pegged to $1. At a scale of Luna? No. So that's $25 million versus $40 billion. That's one blockchain with a small set of use cases. That's an ecosystem. That's its own blockchain with many different people involved and legacy financial institutions. So there's a gap between these two of what have algorithmic stablecoins actually earned in terms of their trust. Well, that's just one example. Then on-chain governance is another example. Cardano is the first to really turn on-chain governance at this scale for a network of this size. But people have come before, like Dash and Tezos and Polkadot, for example. They've had various sizes as well. So Cardano is pushing the envelope. So we can trust on-chain governance at the scale of Cardano. Could we trust it at the scale of Bitcoin? Probably not. So there's always a referential thing that exists there. And I always encourage regulators to look at it that way. Then when you think around consumer protections, you start thinking, oh, okay, well, let me make a list of the things I'm most concerned about that are problematic. Could we trust blockchain with the totality of the U.S. economy? No. Could we trust it as an audit layer of the Treasury Department to basically look at all the payment inflows and outflows? Probably, yeah. And actually, it'd be tremendously valuable because then you put AI on top of it, and then you can look for waste, fraud, and abuse. And then suddenly we won't miss $100 billion that we sent to Ukraine, or USAID won't be paying millions of dollars for transgender surgeries in Guatemala and things like that. It's like weird stuff that we're not exactly sure why it's there, but somehow it's there because no one's watching. Because at the end of the day, it's $7 trillion budget. There's billions of transactions. There's 200 government agencies. There's over 1,000 commissions and subgroups under those agencies. It's not possible for one human to see all of that or understand it. It'd take a lifetime just to go through it. But if you have it structured the right way, that's auditable and transparent with an AI system, you can trust that you're getting accurate information, and then you can make actions based on that.
But do you think that that's what Elon Musk should be doing? I mean, he already expressed interest in putting the US Treasury in a blockchain, and it looks like he's looking at different blockchain. But how do you see this integration happening? What would be the recommendation that you will give to him?
So Musk, we know, is going to do certain things. So he's building Grok 3, and it's almost out. And there's going to be a variant of Grok 3 that they're working on to basically connect up with Doge. And he's going to use that to look at payment transparency as well as legislation. So he alluded to this in some of his public comments, but they're working in that particular direction. So Grok 3 is a pretty capable system. It's going to be on par with O1, and they're adding new things. But, you know, other systems exist too, like Llama 4 is just about to come out, and it's another one of those frontier models. So there's an AI part of this conversation that Musk is very interested in. But then there's a data part of this conversation as well, and really the key is first, having a place that's beyond reproach to put things, and then making sure that the things you put into that are accurate. So blockchain is the thing beyond reproach that you put the things into because it's auditable, time-stamped, and transparent and immutable. So no matter what, you can't break those records, and even if they're inconvenient to people. So by getting read-only access to various institutions like the Treasury Department, they're starting the process of asking that foundational question of, well, how do we get a blockchain to be part of this? But it by no means isn't the only part, because how do you know that the records in the blockchain are accurate? So that's where the AI component is so powerful, because it can help you get to a point of level of confidence, and then you can inject those records in. Now, as much as we love Musk, it's difficult for Musk to unilaterally make this decision. So a lot of people have their hopes very high, and they say, oh, well, Musk might pick Ethereum or Bitcoin or Cardano to be the audit layer. That's a government procurement. And even if he tries, there'll be a class action lawsuit in 15 seconds that there's a process, agency by agency, for the government to adopt these types of things. So what he can do is create the recommendations. And then through law and policy, over time, they can start a procurement process so that people can actually start proposing to use certain blockchains for the U.S. government to store these things.
Interesting. And beyond government transparency of spending and what we just mentioned, how putting data on a blockchain could be valuable really for citizens of a country, for example?
Well, it gives you real-time continuous auditing. So you'll never run into a situation where we say on the U.S. side that we gave $175 billion to Ukraine, and then the leader of Ukraine, Zelensky, says, well, I only got 75 billion of it, and I'm not really sure where that other 100 billion went. It's a mismatch.
Yeah.
So if our side has those records, the citizen with tools, and those tools will be open source and democratically available, can basically search and see down to the penny where the dollars went and what programs they went to. And what's nice about it is it starts a public policy conversation about what should be secret and what shouldn't be secret. Yes, secrets exist. There are classified budgets. There's intelligence agencies like the NSA and the CIA, and the military has intelligent covert operations that they run. But should we have 2 billion classified documents, and should everything be secret, and should we not have a right to know? Because anytime anything's embarrassing to the government, they just make it classified, and then you don't have to reveal it. So that's been abused. And by this transparency, if we see that 70% of all the money we're sending out is secret, the American people start asking questions, why can't I see into that bubble? So it starts the conversation, and it starts people to start chipping away at the problem. You can't solve a $7 billion budget, a $7 trillion budget overnight. You chip away at it piece by piece. And you start with some first principles and foundational capabilities, like how do we create a mechanism for people to at least know what is transparent and what isn't. And then you also start by looking at the most egregious examples and start getting rid of those egregious examples. And little by little, you can winnow in. And what ends up happening is people start understanding that what's recorded in the books is different from the actual reality. So like U.S. aid is a great example of that, $76 billion. And what's recorded in the books are all these strange things, like we give the BBC some money, and we give these other guys some money. That's a leftover from the Cold War, where the CIA worked with U.S. aid, and basically they used it as an extension of our foreign policy. So they would convince foreign media and they'd convince foreign actors to basically be pro-American by bribing them through grants. That's why the BBC gets 8%. They would have been pretty much against the Iraq war, but maybe they write some nice things about the Iraq war, and lo and behold, about 10% of their budget comes from us. So they don't publicly say that. USAID is supposed to be, we build wells in Africa and we help the kids and all these other things, and look at how great we are. But then there's this uncomfortable legacy Cold War stuff that exists from the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, even before USAID existed, about how we use money as part of our foreign policy. The American people don't consent to that. It's made in dark rooms by bureaucrats with no transparency, and politicians may not even be aware. If you're elected president of the United States, it's not like they come up to you day one and they say, okay, Mr. President, here's all the shady shit we've been doing. Here's this folder and we'll walk you through it. No, you have to ask. But if you don't even know they're doing it, how would you know to ask and say, hang on a second, tell me everything about USAID? So that's another valuable part of the forensics, is we'll find contradictions or weird things where there's a delta between the mission of the organization and what the organization is doing. And there's a hidden story there, and it's now being brought out into the public as an audit, and people have to make a decision. Do we feel comfortable that something that's supposed to be an aid body is also being used with a dual purpose for the CIA? And if we don't feel comfortable as a society, maybe we pull those apart and return that to its original purpose. And of course, there's going to be a lot of people that freak out about this because they make a fortune from the way this is. Like, I didn't know all those celebrities that visited Ukraine, they got paid money. I had a call with Sean Penn when he went to Ukraine. He didn't tell me he got $1.5 million from USAID to go there for his visit. I thought it was out of the grace of his heart. It's the same for Bono when he performed in the subway. He got $5 million for that. Go figure. I didn't know I paid for that. as a U.S. taxpayer.
It's crazy because at the end of the day, it's all about narrative, and that's what the public buys in. And there are people creating narratives, and other people they are just following it. So it's gonna get quite complicated. But I want to touch a bit about the work that you are doing. Cardano's been doing in Argentina. I think you were there during the summit, right? During the Cardano summit, and there was the first legally binding smart contract in Argentina that was signed, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's great. And that was done by some of the team there, with Lucas Amaro and others. And basically, Argentina is going through a massive transformation. They elected a real libertarian. There's a lot of these people on the right who say, I'm a libertarian, but, they're conservative. They're not libertarian. Milei is a real libertarian, which means he actually wants to get rid of governments, which is not really fully possible, but he's doing a good job. He even has a minister of deregulation. His name is Schwarzenegger, and Federico Schwarzenegger, and he's gotten rid of 1,400 laws. He shut down entire services. In fact, when I was in Argentina, they got rid of the AFD, which is the tax agency of Argentina. That would be the equivalent of the Americans getting rid of the IRS, which is just mind-boggling. I was like, how do you get rid of your tax service? Now they have a surplus, and their inflation is under control. Foreign investment is up, and crypto's taking off by wildfire. The GDP of Argentina, depending on how you count it, is around $700 billion. There's $100 billion of stablecoins and crypto equivalents in Argentina. So 1 out of every $7 of GDP value is in crypto. That's the highest percentage of any country in the world. Incredible when you really think about it. And so when you have a libertarian president who's an Austrian economist, he foundationally agrees with what crypto is trying to achieve. He loves the private industry. It's a match made in heaven. So it's going to be a growth market, and there's going to be a lot of great opportunities in the private sector as well as the government sector to basically revolutionize and refine. And the other cool thing is Milei is in direct contact with Musk. They talk to each other on a pretty regular basis, and he's in a regular contact with the Trump administration directly because they're interested in how to replicate some of the cutting stuff that he's doing with Doge. It's never been in my lifetime that the president of Argentina is actually an advisor to the president of the United States and his people in influencing U.S. policy. Typically, it's the other way around. Milei has some international gravitas that more often than not is not there. And you'll actually see him this month at CPAC. That's February 19th to 22nd. He's going to go up there and speak. That's basically the brain trust of Trump's party. So it's really remarkable to see that. And they're getting along very, very well. So we went there. We've engaged directly with the government. I met with Milei, and we know a lot of people in his government. And I do believe Cardano has a lot of great opportunities there. How we're going to get started at the IO side is we're going to build an office in Buenos Aires, and we're going to do application development down there. So Lace, our mobile client, will build that in Argentina and get that done. But then beyond that, we already have local partners, and the largest is Globant, and they have more than 20,000 developers. They're a huge company. They're publicly traded, multi-billion-dollar company. We've already signed an MOU with them. They're going to be working on Cardano. They're going to be building stuff in the Cardano ecosystem, and we'll also do AI projects and applications with them. In addition to that, we're exploring how do we create a venture ecosystem. So a lot of these small businesses that are doing interesting crypto stuff, can we invest in them or add them to our ecosystems? And in particular, we'd like that for the Midnight part of Cardano. And for Midnight, we'd like to get a lot of Midnight applications built there. And that's one of the areas that Globant is going to be cooperating as well. And that's just the beginning. The next step is also to start looking at some specific problems. And some Cardano applications have already gone there, like Palmyra, for example, and they're trying to figure out how to get the lithium from the lithium mines up on the Cardano blockchain through their framework, the Palm economy.
Wow, seems there is a lot going on. There is one thing that I want you to clarify here, because obviously I talked to different people in the space, and they all remember 2021 when there was a lot of hype around Cardano, could do that. Yeah. There was a big commercial department, but there was not much that was done. And actually, I felt like we kind of lost the momentum, right? Yeah. It was a big momentum there. And it was kind of like everything not collapse, because never collapse. You are being, developing and working still. But what you have got now that you didn't have then, and why now is a time where you could actually develop those applications and an ecosystem that thrives?
So I think we first had the wrong commercial approach. The commercial department that I had, and they were very good at getting MOUs. They were very good at talking to people. And whenever I met with them, they had these beautiful spreadsheets, and they said, we have 100 deals in the pipeline, and we have all these things. And I said, oh, wow, that's incredible. This is really cool. The challenge was that there was always a delta between our capacity to deliver and the capabilities of the ecosystem and the intent of the MOU. So it was kind of MOU theater, and it didn't work out so well for us. So we had to shut that down, and it was very painful because we let a lot of good people go, but it was not really a sustainable initiative on the IO side, and we had to gradually rebuild it. So what we did in 2022 and 2023 is we focused like a laser on building capabilities. So we built a lot of stuff into Cardano, and like we got Aiken, we got Plutus V3, we got Hyperledger Identitas for identity programs, we got Hydra, we got all these amazing capabilities, and we kind of built up that house of capabilities. So we know that Cardano can do pretty much anything that people throw at it. And I think for the most part, those are successful. Then what we started in 2024 is let's rebuild commercial, but start within the Cardano ecosystem. Yeah. So we started talking to Book.io, we started talking to Sunday, we started talking to all the big dApps in the Cardano ecosystem, and we built relationships with them. And some were pretty frosty, and they had to be warmed up a little bit. They were a little bitter about how things had. Others were very happy to have us and brought people to the ranch and did these things. We also, at the same time, had to rebuild Lace because it wasn't fit for purpose, and that was a very painful transition to go through. The good news is we're on the other side of it, and now we have a situation where we feel pretty comfortable that Cardano or Cardano and friends together can actually satisfy things. So for Cardano in the dApp space, we have a path to pretty much do anything Solana or Ethereum want to do, and we have good dev frameworks and, more importantly, good dev companies that are very agile and capable of delivering. This is why the Globant partnership is so important, because it's very elastic. They have 20,000 developers. So somebody comes and says, we need 100 developers to do a national ID system in Argentina. We just talk to Globant, and they do that, and they could put 500 people on it if they needed to actually get that done at scale. And that's very easy. But then we have bespoke development firms like TX Pipe and Blink Labs and Harmonic and others. And they're like small, very agile teams, 5, 10 people, 15 people, up to 30. But they basically just move in and get things done like special forces and do very high quality work quickly. And so that network we didn't have previously, but now that we have that network and we built it out, it's ready to go for commercial activity that comes in. And then when we talk about friends, one of the ideas we're going to roll out in May in 2025 at Bitcoin 2025 is this idea of the Crypto Triumvirate. So I don't think Cardano is fit for purpose for everything. You need a privacy layer, so that's why Midnight exists. But then also for really big stuff like the US government, it would be good to bring Bitcoin in as an audit layer and a value carry layer because it's the most secure and largest ecosystem. The Triumvirate is we're going to combine Bitcoin, Midnight, and Cardano together as one development stack. And so you can imagine like visuals, you have a black disk and some dots and a Bitcoin symbol in the center. And so when we talk about like, could Doge put the US government on a blockchain? That is the model to do that. And we've been working with partners like DC Spark. They have this wonderful framework called Paima, which originally was built for gaming, but it's growing into a hybrid application framework, and other partners like Fairgate that are building the interoperability between Bitcoin and Cardano that allows us to put these pieces together, and then you have that framework. And then when you go to a government like Argentina or you go to a government like the United States and say, look, you really need to have this stack. You carry your value in audit in Bitcoin, you do your computation on Cardano, and you do your privacy and identity on Midnight. Now, because we have Babel fees, it's like tourists coming to a country. If I go to Italy and I spend my dollars, well, they get euros. At the end, it creates demand for the euro. So similarly, if they go spend Bitcoin for stuff, it creates demand for ADA inside the system. So what's nice about that is then basically by bringing these large-scale governments, they feel comfortable because Bitcoin's in the conversation and it's not political, and that's the thing everybody trusts and gets. But then you actually get the best-in-class smart contract layer, and then you get a great privacy layer and identity layer. I think that's how you handle the big guys, the Fortune 500. You handle the government. We didn't have that in 2021. We didn't have a conception of that idea, but now we do.
It's very interesting because it looks like you are working from the bottom on integration and modularity as well. So it's not like, because I think a lot of the narratives are Solana is the Ethereum killer, the fastest and the cheapest, and then Ethereum, we don't know what it's doing. retiring or if still doing something. And then you have got Bitcoin that is kind of like digital gold. It's not that Cardano is going to have a specific use case. What you are basically saying is that it's going to work underneath to create a framework where you could work with other blockchain for different purposes, making a government, for example, more confident on implementation and execution of a certain application or project.
Yeah, and by the way, the Midnight Glacier Drop is the first Triumvirate application. So when we build that out, we're going to use the Glacier Drop mechanism using Hydra on Cardano. So that handles the distribution to 135 million people. It launches Midnight. There's a whole Midnight house of applications there. But then we're going to take the redemption logic and put it on Bitcoin as an ordinal or a rune. So you can audit that there. So it's like all three things come together, and it's a great example of how we put those pieces together. And I think people get the idea and say, wow, that makes a lot of sense. So everything is permanent, it's secure, it works really well. And then once we get nested transactions to Cardano, then you can always pay in Bitcoin for all the fees. And then the Bitcoin maxis are super happy because they never conceptually have to leave the Bitcoin ecosystem. Yeah. But under the hood, it takes ADA. So it creates a marketplace, and it creates a lot more liquidity. And also people say, oh, who's the next Ethereum killer? Well, if you add Solana and Ethereum together, they're 4 times smaller in terms of TVL and market cap than Bitcoin and Bitcoin's potential for TVL. So Bitcoin's still the big one, and that's where all the sovereign wealth funds are going to focus when America starts buying in these other things. The U.S. government holds 212,000 Bitcoin, and it holds it because of civil asset forfeiture. So law enforcement, where they took Bitcoin and seized it, and they're supposed to sell it, the first thing Lummis and Trump are going to do is going to allow the government to hold it in the sovereign wealth fund. Then they'll start buying other things, but it's a lot more controversial to go from Bitcoin to another cryptocurrency, because that has a foundation in politics and in what's U.S. and what's not U.S. and all these lawsuits will happen, these other things. Bitcoin, there's no issue with that, and the government already holds it. So that's the place you want to start from and grow out of, as opposed to trying to be an Ethereum killer. That was the narrative in 2021, and
yeah, exactly.
Solana won that narrative. But great, there's going to be SWI now, and in a year SWI will be bigger, and it'll win that narrative. And it's just you're a race to the bottom, because better, faster, cheaper just translates to centralization. They get closer and closer and closer to one guy running the whole thing, because that's the optimal state. You can never be better, faster, and cheaper than a centralized server on Amazon. So you'll notice that Ethereum is very decentralized, all things considered, but Solana not so much. And the next thing will be not so much, and the next thing not so much. And so you eventually get to the top of the pyramid, and nobody can run a node. So that's not the game you want to play. You want to play a different, holistic game and really emphasize the things that make your technology special and build great partnerships with people and grow those partnerships.
And I think you did mention about midnight, and I do think that privacy is going to be a big part of the crypto narrative this year. So where is the ecosystem with midnight, and what can actually be done using that technology?
So Midnight is in its testnet, and it's public. People can go to midnight.network and play around with it and use it. In fact, DC Spark just released a video game on Midnight. And really, there's 2 big value propositions of Midnight when you think about it as an ecosystem. One is the chain of chains. So Midnight is pioneering this model of being a layer 2 to everybody. So it launches from Cardano, and it's secured by Cardano, but Minotaur, the multi-resource consensus algorithm, gives you the ability over time to use validators from different networks to secure Midnight, which means you pay transaction fees and rewards to different validator networks. So Midnight gets more secure over time, but more importantly, if you're in an ecosystem that's getting rewards from it, you view Midnight like a native project. Then the hybrid dApp model, what that does for you is it gives you the ability that you can stay in your ecosystem, keep your liquidity in your ecosystem, and then add Midnight capabilities to your app for privacy and identity to basically help you work through that. And you pay your transaction fees in your underlying assets. So it feels like an Ethereum product or a Solana product or a Cardano product. So Babel Fees works both ways. So we had to first get the model done and get that chain of change things figured out. And then we also had to figure out, like, how are we going to do the legacy Web3 bridge? Because there's a huge set of stuff for real world assets that have not entered the cryptocurrency space. There's $20 trillion of them because of the privacy side. You can't have real world assets without some part of it being hidden because of regulatory reasons, whether it be GDPR or HIPAA or Bank Secrecy Act or what have you. And that's why they haven't entered the cryptocurrency space, or if they have, they've been totally centralized because there's some third party that handles the privacy domain of it. So by building that out, That's a later to come. There's a Web3 component first, but the RWA side comes right behind it. Regulated business starts working its way in. So we think Midnight will be the dominant layer for real estate, for intellectual property, for security tokens, and these other marketplaces. And there's a lot of partners that we can work with, like Abu Dhabi and other places, where they already have native apps for these things that they want to bring into the blockchain space. So we're pursuing both strategies at the same time. And in terms of product readiness, we believe the first version of Midnight will launch mainnet this year. And we'll make some announcements about that when we're a little further along. First announce the tokenomics and the Glacier drop, and then the mainnet launch date. So that'll be a lot of fun. But then, it's an ecosystem. So you have to keep building that ecosystem up and bringing people in. Your first wave of applications are going to be the predictable things. GameFi and DeFi are probably the two big anchors for that. But right behind it will start being some of these RWAs that are a bit more adventurous, and they'll work their way in, which is why we just started a real-world asset working group in Cardano to take a look at things like SIP 113 and SIP, I think it's 143, and we're going to work with the University of Wyoming of convening all those people together with other people in industry who are outside of the Cardano ecosystem and try to create a standards so that everybody can use that standard, and that just becomes the way of doing things. And we think that's going to be a big growth area for hybrid applications. So overall, I'm very proud of it. It's a hybrid technology. So we took Parity Substrate and hybridized it with Cardano technology. So we kind of get the best of both worlds. It's a fundamentally different model than Cardano, which is why it's in the partner chains framework. But what's nice is it will be interoperable with many blockchains at the same time, which is a pretty awesome outcome.
Yeah, super interesting. I do believe the RWA kind of market is going to be really big because, like you said, not everything can be transparent, especially when it comes down to financial market, and something has to be private. AI, thoughts on AI, Chinese approach, US approach, what's happening? What's your
It's one of those things where it's so schizophrenic. You wake up some days and you're like, it's going to conquer everything and kill all humanity. You wake up other days and say, oh God, it's a toy. And the problem is in my brain, I can see both sides of it. I am so impressed with how AI has been developing the last 3 years. When GPT first came out, GPT-3, everybody was blown away and they said, wow, this is incredible. And we all had this idea like in a year, like humanity's over and AI runs everything. Then everybody got bored with it and it doesn't do anything, it's a toy, and hallucination was the big buzzword. Then GPT-4 came out, oh wow, it's so incredible. And then all of a sudden all the open source AI started coming, and in particular we saw Mistral, and that was from France, and then we saw Meta release Llama. Now the Chinese are coming on board and they have DeepSeek and these other frameworks like Qwen. And basically, they're all learning from each other. And the AI models keep solving foundational problems. And one of the biggest problems was data. And how they got around that is synthetic data. So after you train to a certain corpus, you use an AI model to create synthetic data to help fine-tune your model to another problem domain. So you walk the ladder. So the old models make the new models. And that's what the Chinese did with DeepSeek. They basically created an AI model derived from O1 and from Claude and these other systems. They spent 10 times less resources to basically make it because they used the old model to make the new model. Well, DeepSeek has already been used to improve itself. And similarly, O1 created O3, which O3 Mini is as powerful as O1 Pro. O1 Pro would have to think for 5 minutes. O3 Mini uses 2 orders of magnitude less power, and it thinks for seconds, like 10 to 15 seconds, as opposed to several minutes, which is really incredible when you kind of see these types of things. So that exponential progress continues, and the tooling side is looking great. LangChain is just remarkable. There's now the Llama Stack, which Facebook has released. We also have a lot of great agentic frameworks, and that's the big buzzword right now is agents. And so you have Crew AI and AutoGen as agentic frameworks, and they're growing pretty exponentially as well. I mean, they used to be toys and the agents really didn't do anything, but now the agents are able to do really sophisticated coordination, dynamic role changes. They have long-term memory. They have long-term planning. They have load balancing of knowing when to switch from an expensive model to a fast, cheap model based upon the tasks that the agents are assigned. And that's just in about a year and a half of progress with those agentic workflows. And all the major guys are starting to release agentic workflows. So OpenAI released Operator, and I think Claude has something that they released. So it's pretty impressive. The bigger question is, will this continue to be something that either I own a lot of hardware and I take an open source model and deploy locally, or I'm OpenAI and I have a giant server farm and people buy that and consume that? Or do I want to have a decentralized model and bring this into the cryptocurrency space? And I know Near and others are chasing this, but I did a speech at AI4, which is a giant AI conference that Geoffrey Hinton was at, who's one of the fathers of AI, alongside Andrew Yang. And I talked about some of the integration challenges of bringing AI together with blockchain. They're not really compatible with each other. AI, vast data, massive amounts of compute, parallel compute, and it's non-deterministic. Blockchain, small amounts of data in the blockchain, it's deterministic, and you're trying to create a shared serialized sequential state as opposed to a non-deterministic process for these things. So there's an impedance mismatch between those technologies. They don't fit together very nicely. Now, that said, blockchain can be the governance layer, the payment layer, and the aggregation layer for the resources. So I do think that solves a major problem in AI of how do you align AI properly but not let Sam Altman be in charge of that or Google be in charge of that? How do you pay people for their data? How do you understand who has royalties associated for fair use of data? And ultimately, how do you create a transaction system around it that's self-regulating so that they run as sustainable business models? All of the big AI companies are near bankrupt, and they're going from one funding round to another funding round to another funding round. Facebook, for example, they're spending $60 billion this year on their Llama group. That's not sustainable. Microsoft is spending about the same. And then OpenAI, the only reason it's in business is they keep raising money, but they don't make a profit. And Claude doesn't make a profit. Anthropic doesn't make a profit. Mistral almost went out of business. And the French government's like, we need to keep this alive because France needs to stay in AI.
It is interesting because the way that I see it, like, they are kind of working on a mission, right? They want to have all this big data. That's the mission. Where the Chinese, they focus on execution, like
Right.
point of sales, right? Let's get this done. And maybe you don't need so many data, right? You
Yeah.
can kind of like, but it's very interesting. Charles, you do many things, right? You run IO, you speak many conferences, then you have got your health business as well. How do you divide your time amongst all of these things that you're doing?
It's challenging. Yeah, that's why it's been a very busy year. I run 6 companies, and every one of them has their own unique needs and demands, and they don't go on hold for each other. Like, for example, I have a ranch in Wheatland. It's got 11,000 acres and 800 buffalo. So these bison, they run around and they get sick or they're pregnant or have these. They're not going to like delay that and say, well, I understand you're very busy with your other 5 businesses, so I'm just going to like stop being a buffalo. They don't know anything about that. They do their thing. It's a living organism. The same for the healthcare clinic. And there we have 11,000 patients, and those patients are, it's a multi-specialty practice with 40 providers. And we have everything from a surgeon to a cardiologist to internal medicine, and we do a lot of public health. And then we also have a research company that does biotechnology. And there we're doing FDA trials with regenerative medicine. So we have stem cells with hyperbarics. And we have to get that company to play nice with the clinic because the clinic does translational medicine. But they're saying, well, we do patient care. We're not stem cell people. And they sometimes like oil and water with those two, even though they're co-located in the same place. And so we have to kind of resolve that. Then I have a synthetic biology company. And that company genetically engineers organisms to do things. And we have some cool announcements this year that I think people are going to be blown away by, and it's doing quite well. And then obviously we have the crypto portfolio, and that's a huge thing. Plus I run a family office and a construction company. The construction company, we pour concrete and do dirt work and build buildings and these things. Some of the stuff we're building is pretty sophisticated. The family office obviously has its own culture because it has to take care of my money. And then the crypto is the biggest part of my time. So I have a good administrative team, and I have a good personal knowledge management system. And ultimately, you have to accept that the definition of success is not perfection, but it's about 70%, 80%. Stuff gets dropped. And you have to have good delegation. I have very strong leaders like Tam Hassan, for example, at Input Output. She does a huge amount of work, as does a lot of people on her staff, like Carlos and others. JJ's been a phenomenal chief of staff for me, and he works really hard on a lot of the commercial stuff and the relationship building. He's one of the few guys I see work as hard as I do in this office, like 12 hours a day on the phone, calling people. Same for Chelsea, my EA, and I have other EAs as well. That do various things. And I have good ranch management like Kevin and Grady are there, and my family office is led by Keller. So there's a lot of good people, across that network. And, every one of them has roles and responsibilities. And how I tend to manage is more on the strategic level. But every now and then I go into the product and actually get involved in the product development. Like I'm doing that with Quantum Hosky, for example, which which is one of our newest products. And I'm doing that a lot right now with Midnight because I think there's some foundational things that need to be addressed to get it done. My brother also helps me a lot. He runs the clinic up in Gillette, Wyoming, and the biotechnology company, along with Tom Davis, the CEO up there. And my dad is a doctor too, and he helps run the clinic. So I have a lot of trusted people. No one's an island. You cannot do great things without great people, but then you need to also have great processes, and you have to think about the entire cycle. Do you have a good task management system? Do you have a RACI for every single thing? And is that accountable party actually doing their job? Are you good at program management? Are you really good at having a dashboard to track and trace things? Do you have appropriate budget controls in for all these places with break glass events that they escalate up to you for an emergency thing? And then overall, are you managing the risk of the portfolio as a whole appropriately? And do you know when to shut things down? Like we had to shut a lot of things down over the last 3 years, as you know, and sometimes it's very painful. But at the end of the day, it simplifies things and allows you to focus more and allows you to get much better results, overall. So I'm still learning how to do it, but I'm a heck of a lot better on how to do it now in 2025 than I was in 2021. And it means I have a little bit more free time to play. Like I own a Black Hawk helicopter and we get to do all kinds of crazy shenanigans with that. And I get to do a lot of crazy adventures and go to weird places in the world and try not to get killed. So I get to do that as well. And that's what keeps me going. That's what re-energizes me. The mental health and the physical health is equally important to doing the work. And if you do just the work, eventually you burn out, no matter who you are.
No, 100%. And you need to be passionate about what you do, but you need to have fun as well. And also you are this cheerleader, right? You need to be the cheerleader for all the business. That's also is the big job, right?
Yeah, I have to sell it. I have to make people, if I don't believe it, why would anybody buy it, right?
Exactly. That's the most important. And then resilience, something else that is really, really important is, to go through things with a smile and always, things always has got problem and you just need to carry on and eventually you get there.
Of course. Well, that's the thing that Italy taught the world is like everything you do, you have to do it with love. Everything.
Yes.
Yeah, it says that's the most important thing. So when you look at crypto, you have to do it with love. And you look at the design of Cardano, there is a lot of love in that. Ouroboros is 10 years of effort and it's just getting better and better. But the people behind it, it's not like a protocol for them. It's the emotionally they connect to it and they say, this is part of my life. If you're a genius scientist, why would you want to spend 10 years of your life on something that is just trivial and you throw it away? It's like they're connected to it and they want it to succeed. And a lot of people in the Cardano ecosystem, they've been in for a really, really long time. And it's the same for all the other businesses. Like my clinic up in Gillette, Wyoming, we didn't go rent an office building and it's got like drywall and stuff like that. We built it as one of the most beautiful clinics in the world. We have terrazzo floors and incredible artwork inside of it. And I'm building a Godzilla diorama inside of it. I got all these exotic structures. It's the only clinic in the entire world that will have a Yayoi Kusama infinity room inside of it. So it's just this magical artwork that's there. And then not only that, the exam rooms, we built beta rooms inside our construction warehouse because we're the construction company building it. So everything is love there. And we brought the physicians over and the nurses over and we said, design this room with us. So instead of having some architect that lives 2 states over deciding how the doctor's patient flow is going to be, you actually have the doctor that's involved in this type of a thing. And they say, change this or change that, or don't attach that to the wall because that's a nightmare, or I want my chair here, and the room needs to be bigger because we have bariatric patients and whatever. They say that, and then we go and do the next iteration, and then we get it right, and then we put it in the blueprint. So all of those things, they're made with love. They have to be, and that's what makes it special.
People don't want to get out.
Yeah.
I want to come there if I'm here.
Because, at the end of the day, think about your experience going to a medical center. You're not feeling good, and it sucks to go to some sterile, draconian environment, and it just adds to that feeling of unwellness. But if you go there and there's something warm and inviting and inspiring, you see that these people, if they pay like half as much attention to my health as they've done to the artwork, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to survive. They'll figure it out and they'll take care of me. And the reward is that we've changed a lot of people's lives there. It's been a lot of fun. So that's what I learned from being a quarter Italian and having the Italian grandmother. She told me it's like in Italy, everything is made with love. You have to. The food is made with love. The wine is made with love. The art is made with love. There's certainly a lot of problems, but that's the legacy, and that's why people love Italy so much. And I try to carry that in all the businesses. It's super important.
Yeah, it's great. Charles, thank you so much.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.